So this is our last session for the day. Thank you all so much for sticking with us this whole time. There's actually still a pretty good number of folks still here, which is fantastic. Thank you all. And I should have mentioned it before, but Happy Mother's Day to everybody. I hope you all have a good rest of your day after the session is completed. So this session is the free for all for your questions, whether from earlier sessions or other questions you may have based on your own board experiences. Please let us know what you think of the format about having an entire session for the Q&A. Um, and So joining me, I've got three folks who are highly regarded and respected in the New Hampshire planning world, and I'm thankful they're here and willing to volunteer their time to help us out with this conference. Um, so we've got Mark, who is an AICP land use planner with over 35 years of public and private sector experience, and he holds a master's degree in planning. He has extensive background in project management, dealing with a broad array of planning related issues, including spearheading rezoning efforts, managing development teams, site and land use planning, impact fees, fiscal impact analysis, public presentations, expert witness testimony, land use law analysis, and consensus building challenges.
Good
Um,
afternoon.
all right, there he is. Perfect. I can't see you, Mark, but I think you're probably somewhere. All right, and so we've also have uh, Director Heather Shank. I don't have an intro for her up, but you all know her from the last session. Um, she is the Director of Planning and Community Development here at Business and Economic Affairs. And our third speaker is Carol Ogilvie. And Carol is a seasoned community planner with decades of experience supporting local planning and zoning boards across New Hampshire. She served as Director of Community Development in Peterborough for over 10 years and previously worked with the Southwest Regional Planning Commission and the New Hampshire Office of State Planning. Carol has taught land use courses at Antioch, New England, and continues to consult independently. She holds degrees from Keene State College and Kent State University. Um, and She also serves on the planning board on a planning board. So again, yeah, welcome and thank you all for joining us. So we'll begin this sort of free for all Q&A session for the planner is in. So once again, for the folks who are online, uh, drop your questions in the chat and we will start going through them. I do have a list from the beginning of the session, and so I'll be going through some of those questions as well. And I think the speakers and I spoke a few weeks ago about, if they had anything that they wanted to discuss or things that they'd been hearing, through the grapevine that they wanted to bring up that they'd maybe heard, more recently. They'd be willing to talk about some other topics as well. With that out of the way, I did see a question come in about community input. So, what are the best practices for soliciting community input, desires for drafting and revisiting a master plan? That's a great question to get us started. Do we have a volunteer? By the way, is Carol here? I don't see.
I am.
Oh,
Can you hear
perfect.
me?
I can hear you. Perfect. All right. And I
Okay,
heard I
good.
heard Mark and I can see Heather. Uh, Perfect. Does anybody want to volunteer to jump on the
Well,
master plan,
I'll
Carol?
I'll
All right.
start. I think that the standard way, of course, that has been done for years is to hold hearings at your town hall. But I think over time we have discovered that that's not a very effective way to reach people. So now, in many instances, we try to go to where the people are. So we set up a table at the farmer's market, or we go to the bowling alley, or we visit the local social clubs, fraternal organizations, as many places you can find to get to your different demographic in town, I think is much more effective than just staying in your town hall, trying to get people to come to you.
And I agree with that. And also, I think having a robust survey is appropriate as well. We're updating the master plan in Henniker, and we're going to be sending out a little card to every resident in the community where they can go online and fill that out. We'll have paper surveys around for those who are old school, but I think that's an important provision. And then I think as the process goes downstream, having meetings with, concrete ideas or sharing of ideas that have come up during the process. The consultant for the Milford's update, Steve Whitman from Resilience, had a number of open meetings at Town Hall where after hearing from the public, there was a number of different ideas that were put forth for housing with different chapters because of, master plan's a very robust topic heavy document. So there are a number of sessions where people could come in and give their opinions on specific ideas that would be included in the plan. So I think that works as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I think another consideration, depending on the community where you live and the populations that may be underrepresented aren't at all of the typical places or places that helpful to reach out to organizations that might be helping to serve those communities to get the word out, whether it's, churches or community facilities that are maybe not at the top of your mind because you've never heard of them before. But that can be an important component to consider depending on the type of community that you live, if you have those types of populations that may not be at those other typical places that you usually look.
Yeah, that's all really good insight. I was just reminded I wasn't working for the city at the time, but I know the city of Manchester was doing one of these community outreach sessions, and completely separate, but in the same building, there was a comic convention happening, and so they immediately pivoted and started dragging people in because they were like, oh, all of a sudden here's like 1,000 people, walking into this convention center. Let's capitalize on this and start, so sometimes the people come to you, so you just have to be creative. So let's see, we've got a couple other really good questions.
Farmers market. That's one thing that I've seen to be a really successful location to try to get.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and anywhere people are gathering, yeah, is fantastic. Okay, wow, we got a lot of questions rolling in. Let's see. Okay, this is a really good one. I did want to get to this one. I think we're going to have a lot to say about it. So a topic of importance that we haven't touched on is how to deal with the Airbnb or short-term rental impacts on our communities. So this person continues. They said, we'd like to increase affordable housing, but the things we are doing to do so make it more feasible for investors to buy a property and monetize it. And this actually worsens the affordable housing issue. Any good examples of how to deal with this? So I don't know if anybody wants to jump on that.
I think, the Airbnb issue is very complicated. There's been a number of lawsuits up in the White Mountains, the recreational areas. Portsmouth had a case which they won. So there's actually two issues relative to it. Obviously Airbnbs, to me, they're hotels basically, but regulating them can be tricky, and talking with council, I think, is a high priority to make sure if you're going to regulate them, you follow the most recent statutory requirements and the decisions being made. And as far as affordable impacts on affordable housing, if you're going to, if that's a desire in a community, you really need to set aside with covenants a percentage of those housing units to be restricted to only those in the income bracket you're trying to serve, either under workforce, it's 60% of the area median income for rental and 100% for owner occupied. Because if you don't set that aside specifically and put a covenant on it for 20 to 30 years, it's just going to go, as the questionnaire mentioned, to market. And obviously adding supply is a big concern in our state for housing. So adding units is appropriate. But if your goal is to try to expand the affordable housing base, there needs to be an incentive or a provision in that regulation that mandates some of those units stay affordable over time, because otherwise it's just going to go to the highest bidder.
One town that I work with had the same concern about the Airbnbs, using up available housing, and the town adopted an ordinance last year that so it's sort of a two-tier approach to having an Airbnb short-term rental, that if it's happening in the home where the property owner lives and rents out a certain portion of their home for this use, then there is no limitation on the number of days that could be rented. But if it's the building that's been specifically designated for this use and nobody else lives there, then there's a 90-day limit on how many days that can be rented. And then there's a whole process, of course, they have to fill out and have the fire chief come and inspect, and they have to register with the town. So it's, a bit of a process.
I'll jump in to say that I know there's been a number of legislation bills put forward to try to regulate these in different ways. And there's not wide agreement on whether they're good or bad. So different communities, some communities don't, they like their Airbnbs, or they're not opposed to them. They're property owners who are using them for income, maybe in support of some other business that they have. But, I've heard property owners, B&B owners who said, don't limit the number of or how long people can be in here, because right now I can rent it year long, multiple people all the time, makes a lot of income for me. If you limit it to whatever, 6 months or whatever. Now, so the assumption is we're going to limit it so that property owner has to live there. Right? We're trying to incentivize it so the property owner lives there, and maybe they rent it out when they go on vacation. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is it's a secondary unit, it's a secondary home. So they're only renting it out 6 months a year, and it's vacant the rest of the year. So it's still not providing housing for an actual resident. So there's not a lot of, I think, agreement on whether they're good things or bad things. And BEA, I think that's something that we would love to put out some guidance on and look at some communities that are doing it well, like Carol's saying. But at the same time, it's difficult for us to maybe put something out that is maybe contentious or politically divisive, or makes us seem like we have a viewpoint on it, when we're not necessarily allowed to have a viewpoint on it. One thing we have been asked to do and looked into is keeping track of them. And so that's a whole nother problem, because as Mark said, these are basically like hotels, but a lot of them are flying under the radar. So meals and rooms tax are not capturing them. We reached out to Department of Revenue to look at their database of B&Bs to figure out if we could start keeping track of them with our surveys, one of our surveys. And they were like, well, we would love to keep track of them. That's our whole job, but they don't necessarily know. And it's not like your local assessor who's going to see the ad and now they're going to, tax you differently or realize it's there. The state doesn't really have the capacity to sort of do that policing. So just keeping track of them is very valuable, but we haven't really figured out how to do that yet. But working with DRA is hopefully something that in the future, because if we know how many there are, it helps us get a sense of the capacity of the use and the problem.
I think, the town of Meredith, if I'm not mistaken, for any multifamily use prohibits them to be rented out Airbnb for short-term rentals. which I think is one way to approach it. I mean, obviously in our recreational areas is where it's most acute as far as impacting housing, because instead of those units being available to people that want to live there year round, work there year round, they've become an investment portfolio or opportunity for people, and it's not available for rental to people that want to raise a family or have a home permanently. So, but again, I think you really need to talk to council, because you don't want to get something adopted and have a challenge. So just be smart about it, but it's definitely something that needs to be looked at carefully on a case-by-case basis, and taken care of that way.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, that's a very timely topic. Let's see. So the next question we have, this might be, yeah. Okay. I'll ask the question. This may be more of a question for a lawyer, but is there any statute or guideline already in effect that would limit the number of houses that could be in a single development that empties on a Class 5 road, so on a road that is not an arterial road?
I'm not aware of any statute like that. That would really be very site specific to that community. I think if obviously the project's going to have to meet local zoning requirements as far as density. You know, if there's concerns about the volume, a traffic analysis should be completed, and that's going to bring up or highlight issues offsite that may have to be addressed by that development, either offsite road improvements, you know, worst case, a signal. That would have to be a very large development to trigger that. But if it's in a very busy community, the new development may trigger take an intersection that's heavy but doesn't warrant a signal, and trip that trigger to put in a signal. But I don't. That would be a local thing. I'm pretty sure there's nothing on the books about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would have to be very site specific. There would have to be a very good documented reason to limit the number of houses, you know, beyond what they would be allowed to have through the zoning.
I agree with both.
All right. Excellent. So this is actually kind of an interesting question. And it's pertaining to, you know, last year's legislative changes, which were pretty, you know, pretty all encompassing. So I've been this quote, I've been on the planning board for 3 years, but last year's legislative changes were very taxing to evaluate. SRPC, which is Stratford Regional Planning Commission's toolkit, was a lifesaver. Is that quantity of legislative changes impacting planning board normal, or was that unusual?
Very
The number
unusual.
of changes.
We've never had that many. It was one of the busiest years in a very potentially, I don't even know, decades. I don't know. There's not been this much focus on housing or effort to affect it or funds spent on it of the past few years. This year is likely to be, you know, similarly more than normal, and potentially maybe the next few years, you know, as long as we're having these issues with housing, we may continue to see a lot of stuff attempting to come down the pike.
I would agree with that.
Heather,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the bills that are in this year are an attempt to undo some of the legislation that passed last year.
Yep,
Yeah,
true.
I would agree with both of that. But it's also a reaction to the housing crisis that's impacting our community and our state. I mean, the median price point for a home in New Hampshire right now is over $500,000, which is just astounding to me.
It is, yeah.
It's really, we're getting a lot of out-of-state buyers bringing cash, which is impacting the market. There's no inventory. And the governor and a number of the legislators have, you know, plainly stated that their goal is to increase housing opportunities, which I support. Our industry is crying for employees, and if you can't even afford to live here, that's a real problem. But I would agree, it's this past year was crazy as far as the volume. I've never seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite a year. And yeah, we'll see what happens after this next legislative session. So Mark, I have a question for you. It is quite specific. So if you don't feel comfortable answering it, I think
Okay.
that's all right. But it says why why do you think your proposal failed to go from 5 to 37 units per acre in downtown overlay district in Milford, in the downtown overlay district in Milford?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think part of it is social media got ahead of it with a lot of misinformation, to be honest with you. And we didn't do a better enough job to get ahead of that. So I think more public education is necessary. That density exists in the community today. And, you know, if all across New England, what's surprising to me, especially all across New Hampshire, um, in most communities, you cannot rebuild your village, your downtown, because the
Amen.
zoning in place prohibits it. You know, we have properties in town, in Milford, that are 70 units an acre, but nobody knows that. And so I think it scared people. There was a lot of misinformation, as I stated. So I think that's part of it. Our downtown is hurting. There's a lot of vacancies, and I think a lot more foot traffic with people with market rate units are necessary in our downtown. There's a lot of Rite Aid just moved out. We've got a gas station that's been empty for 10 years. You know, so there's an opportunities to do that. It was a new development of senior housing, which I support, but there's too much of it downtown, where they converted a old newspaper into senior housing. Came out beautiful, and it was 30 units an acre. So I think it's education, and it was disappointing, but you know, that's what you got to do there. You got to get ahead of things.
Yeah, I think I remember reading something about, you know, a block downtown requires approximately 1,000 units, housing units, you know, within walking distance to really thrive.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. The zoning downtown Milford now is 5 units an acre. I mean, it's a joke,
mm,
you
yeah.
know. But not to get too parochial.
All right. So the next question that I see here seems like it actually might be a better question for our ZBA track, but I'll ask it anyway. So what is the protocol for a project that received a building permit to renovate an existing structure that should have gone through the ZBA for permitting first, as the project is a change of use?
I feel like, so I've come across this in other situations where, like, first you should make sure this is a kind of like check with your lawyer kind of thing. You know, a change of use, first of all, doesn't necessarily mean a variance or the ZBA approval is needed. You know, change of use doesn't automatically mean that you need to go to ZBA. Especially if the use is a permitted use, if they're changing from one use to another use, that may be perfectly acceptable per that municipality's regulations. But it would end up like if you're a private citizen and you're like, hey, they needed ZBA approval, you know, it's kind of like, you know, shouting at the brick wall kind of thing. Like, are you going to go and hire a lawyer and take the city to task and say, hey, you didn't enact your regulations appropriately? Or is it the municipality who's like, oh, whoops, we screwed up. You needed a variance and you didn't get it. If that's the case, then it's kind of like, it's really difficult. You know, if you try to retroactively say you need a variance, you know, I think depending on the situation that you might be able to do that, or you might also just get sued. by the applicant who doesn't want you made a mistake and it benefited them, and lets everybody move on, kind of thing. So I've seen it handled both ways.
Yeah, I think, obviously the quality of the regulation of the zoning ordinance is important. In some cases, it'll specify what a change of use is and the intensity. That's usually the trigger. If you're going from an office to an office, that may be fine. Going from an office to McDonald's, it's obviously much more intense. That typically would require a variance. But if the language is very vague, then it leads to open interpretations. And obviously whoever issued the permit made a decision locally that this change was okay and met zoning. Doesn't mean that's the case legally, but it appears that's what happened.
Yeah. All right. So we've got another question, kind of looping back to our discussion on Airbnbs and short-term rentals. So quoting this person. They said large organizations are buying privately owned homes and renting them out as profit centers. This precludes the private ownership of a home for many people. Do you see a danger in this scenario as a greater percentage of homes are gobbled up by corporate ownership? This seems to bar private ownership from a home. How can young people expect to buy a home when big corporations hold a large number of homes, which will not become available again?
Yeah,
I think we
that's a
sort
very
of
tricky
covered
one.
that.
Yeah, I've started to see this in communities where actually a whole neighborhood is all the homes that are being built are rental, 100%. So they're long-term rentals. They're not Airbnb. So people and families are living there, but they can't buy. They're renting on a month-to-month basis with a year-long lease. There's obviously pros and cons to that, but I'm starting to see that more and more. And I guess if you're going to prohibit that, I would definitely talk to your land use council. It's one thing to regulate Airbnbs, which again I think are nothing but more than hotels. It's another thing to limit long-term rental, basically, depending on it's if it's a single-family home, trying to prohibit that may be more challenging, and you want to have some sound legal advice if you're going to do that.
I don't even know how you would regulate that. Like, how would you
Yeah.
prevent a specific buyer or a specific rental time? Like, I'm not sure any of that is
Right.
would even be kosher per the statute. I was at a conference recently or a seminar, and I can't I don't know if it was the Manchester Chamber. Can't for the life of me remember who put it on. Got to think that Fiscal Policy Institute might have been there or had some part in it, but they had speakers from like at the federal level. I'm remembering now, there was a guy from Maine or Massachusetts that came in and speak about these types of fiscal issues. And it was just a really big conversation that nobody really had any answer to. There was some thought that like, oh, this is actually not happening as much as you think it is. And then other people were like, actually, this is a big time thing happening in my community. So I really think it's a bigger conversation that we're not necessarily equipped at this level with to sort of look at it without knowing. I think it's a good one for Fiscal Policy Institute to sort of like look at and maybe think about if that's actually happening or what it means or what are the impacts, or somebody needs to make. I think if it is happening, I agree it's a huge problem, and somebody needs to come up with some potential policy fixes that we can implement that would, but it might also have to do with like federal policy and what's incentivizing these things at the federal level. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. I mean, these people are large apartment holders, and instead of being a garden building with 30 units in it, they're single family homes, and
Yeah.
just treating it the same way. Yeah, it's very tricky, and you should definitely be careful.
Yeah. And Trump said something, I think, didn't he, about like prohibiting big companies from buying up homes? I mean, he says a lot of things, but like I was like, oh, that's interesting that he's having that conversation, or he's aware of that issue at that level, and that people are like saying whatever random things they're saying, people are talking about it.
It's
I
definitely
think
something
New York
happening
City,
nationwide, and it is happening in New Hampshire.
Brendan, I think you skipped over one about with detached ADUs now allowed. Would you encourage more regulation of their rental?
I wouldn't.
Again, I don't know how you regulate whether things are rental or people try. They say, oh, you got to have a occupancy in order for it to happen. But I think as a best planning practice, it's not a popular solution. And how do you regulate? How do you enforce that or monitor that? Whose job is it to make sure that it's that guy that lives there that owns it? It's like a whole. It's not something we do.
Yeah, I don't think you can regulate if a property is rented or owned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Sure,
it, you know,
fine.
it just,
Sure, we love that, but how do you do that?
Yeah.
and it, you know, it goes back to this, you know, perception that renters are somehow, you know, less desirable than homeowners, and we need to control them so that they don't
Yeah.
destroy the neighborhood.
Yeah,
And
it's
yet,
true.
you know, many people started out as renters before if they have a home, you know, they were
Yes.
once a renter. So, and if you think about it, I mean, it wouldn't be any different if it were a duplex and one side was being rented. You know, it's just
Absolutely.
that the layout is a little different, but in practical terms, there's no different effect on the property.
Yeah. I live in a rental neighborhood. I own my home, but I live in a neighborhood with rentals, and I always push back against that perception that there's something wrong with
Mhm.
renters. We love our
Yeah,
renters. We help them shovel them out in the snow when the horrible storms this winter.
yeah.
All right, and actually, speaking of duplexes, somebody put a short question into the chat. Why does building duplexes not need planning board approvals?
State law. You can't apply site plan review to single family or two family homes. It's that simple.
So I actually have a question about this, because I know the zoning ordinance I'm familiar with in Concord, they have like conditional use permits for lots of different things. So for instance, you're only allowed one driveway, but if you want another driveway and it doesn't meet the requirements for driveway separation, you can get a conditional use permit. So there are all of these, I presided over, when I worked with the planning board in Concord, plenty of applications on single family homes that came before the planning board for conditional use permits for different things. So I'm not aware if that was ever just not kosher, or if that was okay, that it was conditional use permits.
Well, I guess it depends on the use. I mean, if it's for a driveway or more than one driveway, I can see that being allowed, but the city wasn't asking for a site plan review. It was,
Right.
Right.
right,
Conditional
Heather? I
use
mean,
permit,
for a
which
driveway
goes to the
or,
planning board, but it's not site plan review.
right, but it was for a specific thing, like a driveway or, maybe a
Right.
wetland setback or something. But
Makes sense.
Carol's right, it's single family and two family. You can't require a site plan. If
Yeah,
it's an
somebody
allowed
just
use,
decided that at the state level, and it's in state statute. That's why.
right, right,
Long time ago.
long time ago.
All right. I was just putting in the chat, somebody just asked if there are any tips for getting up to speed on large cases that have continued for literally years for new planning board members or recently appointed ones, when it's discouraged to talk to other members outside of meetings. So they're talking about cases specifically that have been brought against planning board members to discourage them. I think it's just discouraged. I did also put the federal and state planning and zoning case law handbook into the chat, which we hadn't talked about before. If you want to brush up on your case law, but that's
Well,
slightly
if this
different.
means an application that's been before the board for years, my question would be, what's going on with that? Why is it still before the board?
All right.
but I'm not sure that that's the question.
That handbook, by the way, is a fantastic resource for board members. It has a host of guidance in plain language that's easy to read, and I urge you all to
Yeah.
lean on it. It gets updated every year. It's very, very helpful. And
It is.
updates with new statutes when those get adopted to help give you an idea what's going on. So if you don't have that link, definitely put it on your computer.
Yeah, excellent. That's a great plug. So I just put that link in the chat. So
Cases that have gone on for years, I have not encountered that. So that's a pretty challenging situation, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely stretch the definition of extension.
Yeah. Well, that's not true. I've been part of a few projects where there were issues that needed to be resolved in terms of like stormwater or FEMA or flood. The project was basically on hold for 2 years, and then when it came back, so it's like there was not much that happened. So it's a different situation, though. Like, yeah, 2 years ago we talked about this for one meeting, and now here we are talking about it again 2 years later. There wasn't a lot to get caught up on.
Well, they can always go back to the minutes and the record.
Yeah.
And become familiar with it.
Yeah.
all right, so we just had a flurry of new questions coming in, but I did want to bring one up that kind of takes us out of what we've recently been talking about, just because I know that they asked the question earlier in the first session, and we weren't able to answer it back then. So it's sort of a three-part, two to set up, and then the question. So planning boards are required to assist applicants with the application process, so statement, and planning boards are also required to recuse themselves if they if they assist either party. So please clarify the limits of our assistance is the question. So what's the line essentially for recusing oneself? And we've gone over this a bit, but
I think that I think the notion of the goal of the assistance is making sure that your regulations are clear, that if an applicant comes in, they know the path that's needed to get approval. Assistance and sitting
Exactly.
down with them and helping them design the plan and things like that. It's providing guidance on the path to approval. A checklist. Well, what's the expectation of approval? What information are you looking for? So that's the help that boards are supposed to provide applicants. Versus getting into the weeds on a specific project. Obviously, during a public meeting, the board members can make suggestions or express their concerns of a site, and that's not help. That's not deep assistance. If you meet with them privately and start going over a plan, that crosses the line, obviously.
Yeah.
all right, very good. So apologize a little bit. We're bouncing around just because we got we got a flurry of questions again that I think were kind of came in as we were talking about some of the topics. So
We skipped some at the top after duplex, Brendan. Did we do that on purpose?
did we? Let's see. Sorry, the questions are kind of there are some on up a little bit higher. Let's see.
I wanted to answer because someone asked, does BEA have a list
BA,
or
yeah,
chart
sure,
of
yeah, go
potential
ahead.
housing concepts that could be a menu for local planning boards and housing advocates? And I wanted to address that one because, there are some communities now, and there was an attempt to pass a bill that allowed pattern zoning, which of course I believe would also already fall under innovative land use. So I don't think you need a special anything to create pattern zoning, but it's something that was attempted to do, at the state level. But there are a number of communities that are looking at doing these pattern zone houses, and I would say, it's not something we have an initiative on to create this. And I know the communities that have been working on it, quite a lot has gone into them, into the consultants and creating models that are appropriate for their community. So I'm ironically not sure there's a one size fits all pattern zone model for the state, because each community it might be a little bit different for, but we're keeping a close eye on this pattern zoning concept, and we'll be we'll be sharing other communities' experience with it, what they came up with, how they've done it. So it's a really interesting concept, and I think we'll continue to try to share about it, and maybe communities can learn from each other about similarly to the way they have done with other types of codes, like form-based codes in the state, to just see what everybody else is doing and say, hey, they did this, maybe we can do that too. But we don't have any plans to put anything out ourselves, other than kind of the standard, missing middle housing precedents that we often like to share in various presentations.
Yeah, and I just added to the chat in response to that question the New Hampshire Housing Toolbox, which was a
Yes, thank you.
which was a collaboration between our office, the Office of Planning and Development here at BEA, and New Hampshire Housing, which is a great organization. I don't think we haven't mentioned New Hampshire Housing yet in this track, so I'm mentioning it now. Check them out; they're fantastic. If you're looking for housing resources, they've got a lot. Let's see. Okay, so the questions gotten a little out of hand, so I'm backtracking a bit. They really are coming in hot and fast, which is great.
Someone
Yeah, thank
followed
you.
up on the question about the duplexes, and they specified,
Yep.
he's like, well, really what I'm asking you is, apparently they must have a proposal. Would 13 duplexes on a 10-acre lot be considered multifamily and need approval? And I would say when you have a huge development like that, and everything all on one lot, I know in the city of Concord that would have been considered a PUD. So in many ordinances, you're not even allowed to do more than one unit on a lot unless you have some other zoning tool in place for a site plan review. So yes, it should be permitted through some type of PUD or similar ordinance and have a site plan review, because that's a huge impact. I have experienced with a landowner saying, it's a duplex, you don't regulate us, and being like, that's not logical, not true, and we just have to figure out why and how. How and why is that not true?
Yeah, there has to be something in the zoning that will allow that to happen. It's multifamily, even though it's duplex, it would be a condominium site plan and a subdivision, to be honest with you, because under state statute,
Yes.
A condominium is a subdivision. So, but the site plan would typically rule. But it would have to be that type of development, as Heather said, would have to be allowed by zoning versus a duplex on an individual lot, one duplex, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw that in there because it was relevant to that last discussion.
Yeah. Duplex questions.
Yeah. Duplex questions are great. I'm glad we're getting duplex questions as well. So thank you all for that. Let's see. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything up a little bit higher. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. We've got a question regarding regional impact. So with respect to school district enrollment, what advice would you give a small town planning board as a member of a cooperative school district of 3 towns to consider how to evaluate an application of modest number of housing units say single digits, might have a regional impact due to potential increasing school enrollment. And I'll just plug really quick. I know that New Hampshire Housing actually has an entire study on school enrollment and housing. But anyway, take it away.
I would check with the school district. The school district should know, oh, we can accommodate this many students, or we're way low on students, or we're at the, I mean, I would check with the school district, and in my experience, they have weighed in and for projects in Concord.
Right, and not only that, it might in fact be the situation where they're losing students and they actually need them to keep
Right.
themselves going, and it would not be a negative impact.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, regional impact, that's something that all land use boards, it should be on your agenda. It's actually under statute, something that you're required to evaluate each application. If it's a project of regional impact, and make a decision on each case. So that's something that, I agree with the others that, reach out to the school district to see if there's going to be issue, or have the applicant, so, investigate that. And that's a very reasonable request. But the number of kids that are coming out of those homes, this isn't the 70s anymore. It's going to be a very low number. It's just, I do fiscal impact analysis all over the state, and you'd be astounded at the numbers of kids per unit. It's very, very small.
Yeah.
And let's see, so somebody actually just put in a school-related question, so I'm going to jump to that one. What if the school said the impact would affect the negative by over $1 million?
Well, unless they've got an impact fee ordinance, I don't think there's anything the planning board can do about that other than to evaluate. And, they've done their due diligence by going through the process for regional impact, but they will probably be limited in what they could do about it.
Yeah, I think that that cost feature, is that staffing cost, or is that if the proposed project's going to impact capacity, meaning that there's no room, or they're going to have build a portable or do an addition, it might be scattered and premature. But just the fact that it might cost money alone, and there's plenty of capacity, yeah, it's I think you're limited on what you can do. And that number sounds rather large.
It's dubious.
Yeah, it sounds right. I mean, a teacher's salary is approximately $120,000 a year. And special ed, it's average teacher 18 to 22 kids. So it's going to be one big development.
Yeah, and I just put in the chat the study that New Hampshire Housing did back in 2024, so pretty recently. And they say that new construction students per unit for single family homes, it's 0.4 students per new unit for single family home. Multifamily, it's quite a bit lower than that.
And that's obviously that's a statewide number. I would concur with that in many places, but it's not the norm everywhere. There's a community I was in recently doing an analysis, and the number was 1.2. And that's just because that's that particular community. So, if it's a big issue, do the analysis locally. The state numbers, New Hampshire housing number is a good way to start. But, obviously, if there's a new neighborhood in the community, you can look at that to give you some guidance on what might be happening locally.
And your regional planning commission may be able to help you with that. And
absolutely. Yep.
Great. All right, let's see. Keep seeing more.
I have a question. Do you mind if I jump in, Brendan, when I see
yeah,
one? Like an easy
absolutely,
one?
please. Yeah, go
what
for
are
it.
best practices for making information for site reviews available for the public and abutters?
Yes, thank
prior
you.
and during planning board meetings? Also best practices for communicating the state of developments as it moves to the planning board process. So I know what I did in Concord and what I try to do everywhere I go is when we publish an agenda to have links to those materials. So you can click the PDF, you have the agenda. So typically the agenda is going to be available a week before, right? So it's not an incredible amount of time, but you click the link, it links to the PDF where you have stored somewhere online, and they have access to all that information. But I think it becomes an issue of your website and the ability of your website to communicate information. You should definitely have some type of, maybe update to your website to post these things. Different communities do it differently in terms of the ongoing aspects of a project. As soon as you have an application, if you can post that, it's a pretty big website project you got to look at all of these different aspects of what you want on there, how you want to communicate it, and you need probably a consultant for your website.
Yeah, I agree with Heather. I mean, for larger projects, I've seen communities, and obviously this impacts your staff to be able to keep up with it, depending on the size of the community. But on the planning board link, having project labels with data and links to the application over time, so that getting PDFs from applicants when they come in is very easy today, electronic, so that there's a folder that says the Brown subdivision. And anytime stuff comes in to the community, that data gets loaded to that link so that a neighbor and a butter can view it and see what's happening over time. And I've seen many communities do that, and I think it's pretty effective to be able to update, changes in the plans or studies that get submitted. It's one location and under a file name that everyone's aware of.
There's also one in here. Did we go over this one? We're required to assist applicants with the application process. We're required to recuse ourselves if we assist either party. Please clarify the limits of our assistance. I missed this part of the earlier, presentation, but when they said we're required to assist applicants, I assume they were talking about staff, not necessarily planning board members. And that a planning board or zoning board member would be required to recuse if they assisted either party. So I recall the discussion that you're talking about, but it wasn't clear to me that they were saying that the board has to assist applicants with the application process. I think that's really the clerk or the town. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what I'm not sure if it was.
Well, the statute specifically says the board, but it could be staff, obviously. But I think it gets down to making sure there's an outline available to somebody to say, this is the path to approval. This is our expectation. Here's the checklist, things like that. Yeah.
Right. And for those planning boards that don't have any staff, that discussion would happen, at the planning board meeting where the planning board would explain to the applicant what the process is.
Right. And you can always go in as in a preliminary fashion, for a discussion with the board. It's non-binding, and get guidance that way in a public meeting.
Yes, exactly.
We didn't have time to get to a lot of our questions because we ran over in the earlier session. So
yeah. And it's fantastic that we're getting so many questions, but I do have some that we haven't gotten to above. But somebody did put a question in again, and I did want to ask it. So this is regarding Class 6 roads. So recent legislative changes, decisions about building on Class 6 roads in favor of builder beware, quote unquote, concepts and safe waivers seem to be removing arguments regarding designation of scattered/premature development. Do you see further attempts to erode the concept of scattered/premature development in the future?
I think that legislation intent was to try to loosen the requirements in those communities where you can build on a class 6 road. So it's easier. So you don't have to get local legislative approval, selectmen approval for it, as long as you fill out the waiver form. I think that was the goal of that.
And it has not eliminated the planning board's still ability to not approve subdivisions on class 6 roads. So that's still in place.
Right.
All right. So let's see. Just trying to think of what let's see. Oh, somebody just put in scattered and premature development is an outdated concept. Okay. Let's see. So somebody asked, this is kind of a quick one. Are recorded minutes a new standard operating procedure for planning boards, I'm guessing?
I don't know if it's new. It's been I know secretaries have been recording the minutes for years. I think it's new that they're posted and preserved for long-term record. I'd say that's fairly new. Same with recordings,
I think that person was responding to the question, how do we make information available to the public? And they were saying through the minutes, the recorded minutes, and like, isn't this now standard operating procedure? Because people can, they can have it on YouTube. I know Concord, the whole meeting is on YouTube. It can be an audio, some communities do, or it can just be literally like old school, the Word document type thing. And then they said, so developers present charts and printed documents and don't do anything electronically. But really all you have is their submission. What they submit for review, that's what the board is reviewing. And they can submit other stuff in the public hearing, but they're kind of they're not setting themselves up for success if they're presenting new information to the board for the first time at the meeting. Usually their charts and all that are duplicated in the submission somehow. So,
they should be in the submission. And, if boards aren't requiring electronic submittal, they should, just because I think it's easier for people to have access to it. And a lot of people can't get down to town hall during the day, so it doesn't take a lot of effort to get that posted so that it's available 24/7.
Yeah, it's the municipality needs to start collecting things digitally, making it a requirement. So like say at Concord, when I started, 12 years ago or whatever, we were scanning everything in. We were getting these paper copies, scanning everything in and printing out these massive packets that we were physically, we don't do that anymore. They don't do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore. Now you're required to have a digital submission. And if you introduce something new at the meeting, that information hasn't been made publicly available for review. So one would argue, has it even been noticed properly in that sense, that you've got completely new information that you're presenting to the meeting for the first time. If that happened to me, I would say, hey, we got to postpone this to the next month because nobody's had time to review this, not the public, not staff, and not the board. So, those are kind of those issues. But yes, I think there's a lot of discussion going on, inter participant discussion.
Yeah. Yes, there is a lot going on. Let's see. Here's sort of two questions that or a question and sort of statement question that I think are related. So somebody asked, a large development in a small town, can there be an impact fee for the ultimate cost of the regional school and cost to pay neighboring town for fire and police? And then somebody else responded, I believe it was somebody else responded, I believe that the state has just limited parking requirements, one per household, still a problem in urban areas where it makes sense to have impact fees for parking, not currently allowed, applied to centralized public. Okay, I guess those are different. Sorry. All right. So yeah, we've got one about impact fees and sort of some regional schools, and then a separate question about parking and potentially using I guess impact fees for centralized public parking. So I guess
Yeah,
they're
those are
interrelated.
two separate things. I mean, impact fees, we're doing a lot of impact fee work now in the state. If you want to charge impact fees, you have to adopt a zoning ordinance first to meet state requirements, statutory requirements, and then you need to do the math and to justify the fee. And if there's a large capital cost being incurred to deal with growth issues, be it the fire department, schools, or what have you, then a fee is possible. From experience, typically, 60 to 70% of those costs are going to be borne by the local community, because you can only charge an impact fee on the part of the capital facility that you're increasing to allow for growth. Updating a facility because it's old, you can't charge an impact fee for. You can't charge an impact fee for staff, which is where most of the costs are in the municipal budget. It has to be for capital improvements, such as a school. We did a project last year for the town of Bow for the elementary school. They did an 8-room classroom addition, and then a bunch of renovations inside the building. Those weren't applicable, but 6 of the classrooms were available for growth, and that portion of their cost, bonding costs, we could do the math and come up with a fee for. As far as parking, I think that would be an exaction program or a fee system to go into a kettle to help finance a new garage or something like that downtown. I've seen that in the cities. I don't know if that's something the Concord ever did, but that's a parking space in a garage is probably $40,000 to $50,000 a piece. It's very, very expensive, and typically you only see that in larger urban communities.
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you just said. But you can create the impact fees, provided you have a nexus of what's that phrase? Nexus of
Rational nexus between the impact and
yeah, you can set the fees for, as long as you have a formula that's documenting what the fee, you can increase your community's fees to whatever makes sense. If you can document.
You can do the math, and obviously on a site-specific basis, there's negotiated exactions if there's a situation where they're impacting an intersection that needs an extra lane. You don't need an impact fee for that. That's an off-site exaction. That's another way to approach it as well.
Yeah.
So I've got another question that's kind of unrelated to anything we've talked about so far. So we're kind of switching gears here a bit. They've asked this question twice now. Can a town like Hanover continue to get away with requiring 50 acres to build a house, and then that house be occupied for only 183 days per year? And they say this applies to a large part of Hanover's land space.
Oh boy.
What I said. I mean, there's been bills proposed for like the 2-acre maximum that haven't been successful. But I don't think there's a huge appetite for having a bill for a 5-acre minimum, because that wouldn't be like progressive enough to really apply to most of the state. So the way this question is phrased, can they continue to get away with this? I don't really know. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I don't know the context.
Yeah,
but there's multiple pieces to that question. And I would say no, probably not. But a bill successfully passing that limits it to 2 acres, I'm not sure when that might happen.
That's I'd say that's extremely exclusionary and leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody wants to sue them, could they win? Maybe.
Well, I'm aware of another town that also has a 50-acre zone, and it has not been challenged, so it still exists.
Wow.
Yep.
I thought I knew all these little things about the state, but I have never heard that.
Under
It'll be on the next planning
state law,
trivia.
under New Hampshire DES rules, if with the best soils, all you need is approximately 28 to 30,000 square feet to have an on-site well and a septic system.
Yeah.
So obviously
Those
that's
things
got to be, the soils have to be appropriate, obviously. So that's,
Yeah.
there's many areas of our state that wouldn't apply to, but just to give you context, 50 acres is just, wow.
Yeah, a little excessive.
Yeah, that's what when I was working on that code in Concord, I proposed soil-based zoning.
Right.
If we, Mhm.
All right, so here's another one, and we've got all right. They said thank you for answering the question to the best of our abilities. Yeah, I appreciate the spicy question. Um, So switching gears again, so if a two-lot subdivision plan is presented at a conceptual meeting and the applicant then decides to change the lot line dimensions or size of the two subdivided lots before they come back for the next meeting, could this move to a final decision at that next meeting?
Well, the conceptual is not binding, so in theory, they could go away and change their plan. But that being said, if that town requires a particular kind of project to have conceptual consultation, then they would have to go back for that, to go through that process again. But otherwise, if they go away and decide to do something different, they come back with their new plan and go through the process.
No, I agree with Carol. It's the benefit is two-sided for a conceptual design review process. It's non-binding. The board gets to express its concerns or ask questions, and the applicant presents their plan and asks questions. And there could be a lot of different reasons why plans change, but that's not unusual. I agree with Carol, though, if the mandates conceptual, but if it's just a lot line plan, those are typically pretty innocuous projects. Obviously, if it's a big development and they make major changes, you'd want to know that and have another discussion.
All right. So switching gears again, this is kind of a smaller question or a simpler question, but if there are two or three alternates sitting on a board or on the sideboard, I guess, what would be the pecking order for one or the other to be selected? So if somebody, I suppose,
Whoever
were to
whoever wins the fist fight.
right,
I don't
the
think
rock paper scissors.
whoever wins the rock
Right,
paper.
right.
I don't
I
think
think
there's any prescribed thing about that.
I think it depends. I think typically what I see is alternates by meeting. The chair keeps track of who sat last, and they rotate. But if you have a large case, a complicated case, you'd want that alternate member to sit for that hearing every time,
Right.
so that there's consistency of opinion and review. But if the cases are changing, what I've seen most boards do is just rotate them for every meeting.
When in fact, that's a really good problem to have, because I know so many boards who don't even have alternates. So
Yeah.
that would be an
Great-
unusual
great
problem.
Yeah, I agree, Carol. Yeah. Good for
All
you.
right.
You have that many. Great.
So I've got a couple follow-up questions to some topics that we've covered already. The first one is might have already gone over it, but to just make sure it gets asked. So does the act of asking the school district, back to school districts, about capacity constitute triggering a regional impact process?
No, that's a decision the planning board has to make.
Mm.
If
Okay.
it's a regional school district and the school isn't in your community, I mean, that's what a regional impact's all about. So, and plus, school capacity is one of the more sensitive things and
Hmm.
in a review of a residential development. So asking or getting input from the school board and school committee, school staff, SAU office is very, very typical. And should be just part of the review. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess if you have a really big project and you have a regional school district, it's almost by default there's going to be traffic and cross, relationships maybe, with the communities. So I mean, I guess what's the harm when in doubt, go with the regional impact is what I've always been told.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I sort of misread the question. The very act of talking to the district doesn't trigger it. But if you're talking to the district to get enough information in order to decide whether or not it would have regional impact, that makes sense.
Mm. Okay. And so then the other question that's kind of returning back to a previous topic. So if large organizations own a dominant percentage of the single-family home market and ADUs are permitted by right, do you think that would not result in upward costs for people looking for a place to live?
I saw that question and I just could not recognize the relationship in my mind.
Mm.
I think it's very site specific. I mean,
Yeah.
the market's going to dictate price,
Hmm.
cost. It's very expensive to build today. I can tell you that. Extremely
Hmm.
expensive.
I'm not, I mean, the private corporations owning all the homes could very likely, yes, have a negative impact on the cost of homes, but I'm not sure what that has to do with ADUs.
Mm. Yeah, well, the addition of ADUs, like now they can own the home and add an ADU, creating more rental units, I
Yeah.
guess.
But what does that necessarily have to do with price?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, yeah, but I have no idea. I
Hmm.
don't see the really, I don't
Yeah.
recognize the obvious relationship.
Okay. So here's another question. Again, another pivot to a different topic for wildlife corridors. Whose responsibility is it to figure out where these are, and should these be considered when reviewing an application?
I want to answer this question. So if you have a huge major impact, chances are that there's going to be some type of review required, or if there's a sensitive habitat or an awareness of it, where DES would be involved, right? Or maybe Fish and Game, or some other state agency. The question of whose responsibility is it? I mean, I guess, the city of Concord has a very well technically staffed member conservation commission with a pretty elaborate open space plan that they use consultants, probably Steve Whitley, I don't know, women to create. And so ideally, you'd have that technical capacity in your conservation commission or a plan or something. Barring that, if there's some suspicion of a species or something, you could make that part of your application and request additional information from the applicant, that say, hey, you need to go hire a consultant to evaluate this. I mean, I don't know how far you get with that, but you could potentially do that. But it's really difficult to know. Why would you suspect that there's wildlife corridors in particular? I'm actually just thinking of specific species, but wildlife corridors, that's not information that's known unless a study has been done. There's really no one, you can't call up DES and say, hey, is this, unless there is a endangered species that they have documented in that area.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And
It's very site specific. You'd have to hire a wildlife biologist to do an analysis. I mean, obviously the boards have the authority to require studies if necessary. But on the other side, does the community have an open space plan option so that, if you're trying to protect a corridor, you can do small lots with less road and put in open space that corridor. If you don't have an open space option, shame on you. But you're going to limit the number of units, which is going to open yourself up to, potential lawsuits and et cetera. So, having an open space or updated, robust open space option is perfect example to help mitigate that. But it's if the board suspects it or the Conservation Commission suspects it, then the planning board does have the authority to have an analysis done. I've seen it, and it's been required in some of the communities that I've worked with.
I would say yes, it should be considered, especially if it's an important issue.
Yeah.
But it's not there's no state statute or anything. There is for protection of species and wetlands and things like that, but there's nothing I'm aware of at the state level that regulates or requires protection of corridors.
Corridors, right. I mean, if you're disturbing more than 100,000 square feet of area, that's going to trigger a site-specific permit, which also is going to trigger other reviews, potential reviews of impact to either wetlands or specific sensitive wildlife. But corridors themselves, I agree with Heather, it's not something that's highlighted. It's more, it is an endangered species that's going to be targeted by divisions within DES.
And you typically don't see this in a subdivision checklist.
Right.
So someone would have to know something in order for the planning board to ask for it, because it would
Right.
not be part of the submission requirements typically.
All right. Well, thank you all. I know that we still have some questions outstanding, but we are at time. So I did just want to plug really quickly. We do have a survey in the chat. It's also here, this anonymous conference feedback survey. Please, if you have a minute, if you could give us a little bit of feedback, let us know how we did. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I'm thrilled that we had so many questions, and I'm also sorry that we didn't get to every single one of them.
We got to most of them. I think in the past we've also tried to get some questions answered and then post them after the fact. But I want to thank our Carol and Mark for coming, and I'm sitting in for Stephanie. But I also want to say, Mark, I apologize. It looks like we got your name wrong on the slide. There's a missing O, which has been driving me bonkers for 45 minutes. So I apologize for that.
Heather. I want to thank all the volunteers out there. We had some 60 people on this session today on a Saturday, and there's probably 1,000 other things you'd rather be doing than sitting talking to a bunch of planners. But I applaud your dedication and volunteerism. It's the state can't operate, the towns can't operate without people like you. So
that is absolutely true.
So congratulations to you. You're very important.
Yes, indeed.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us, and again, happy Mother's Day. And absolutely. Yeah, we will hopefully see you all next year.
Stay well, everyone.
Thank you.